So I'm wondering, like, over all this time, how have you seen the music scene as a whole kind of shift? Because like I'm from Denver, and so
Mm.
seeing where it was, when I was in high school and starting to go to shows,
Mhm.
to where it was after I finished university, with it blowing up more and more, and then going back years later and seeing it become like, maybe pushing third biggest music city in the country, like.
Oh wow, really?
Yeah, it's absurd. I can't afford to go to anything. I couldn't afford rent anymore. But they have like a
Yeah,
cool
right.
underground scene that's popping up now, like a bunch of DIY
Mm.
events and warehouse spaces that used to, I mean, they were there, but not as much. So it's cool to see it
Hmm.
grow. And I'm curious, if you've seen similar things in your city.
Yeah, there's definitely been a little bit of a nightclub and event renaissance, particularly post-COVID. There's been a lot of stuff that's popped up, which has been really endearing to see. It's been in the 13 years that I've been involved, it's been a fair roller coaster, particularly in Sydney. I don't know how well internationally advertised it was, but for a good, I'm going to say it was about 7 or 8 years, Sydney was subject to what were called the lockout laws.
That was my next
And
question. Yeah.
yes, those things were disastrously detrimental and a terribly irresponsible thing that was done to our city, and we are still kind of recovering from them. And there are bits that will never recover from them. So, for those who don't know, the lockout laws came into effect. God, I can't even remember when. Maybe it was 2014, 2015. It could have been earlier, something around then. It was the early 2010s at the least. And they're a result of the fact of a couple of people got what were called king hits, which is kind of punched and hit on the and then fall on the pavement to the point where they needed to be taken to hospital, and quite a few of them died. And the local state government, which is our conservative government, the coalition government, made a big hullabaloo about this. Of Sydney's gone out of control and blah 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 blah. And things need to be done to protect the local people. It wasn't taken into account that violent crime rates, particularly ones that involve in hospitalization, had been on a steady decrease over the last 10 to 15 years. It didn't fail to take into account that the lockout laws, which started restrictions from 11 o'clock, that all these incidences that were caused as a result happened at about, I think it's about between 8 and 10 p.m. So at the bare least an hour before any of these things came into effect. And it was also pretty blatantly obvious to everyone the main reason why this wanted to happen, and has been a clear result of what's visually happened afterwards, is it was largely just about real estate development. Most of these events happened up in King's Cross, and King's Cross has some of the most valuable real estate as per land, not only in Sydney, but in the country. And the vast majority of it had been held up by apartment blocks which had been there for generations, and nightclub and venue places. And real estate had had quite a hungry eye on these for ages. And it was pretty blatantly obvious that this was kind of the main driving force behind the lockout laws, mainly because, I mean, not an expert on it, but there's been multiple different reports into connection between real estate developers and government personnel and political personnel in Sydney, which I mean is fairly common through most parts of the world, unfortunately. About 6 months after the lockout laws came into effect, I had a couple of friends who lived in King's Cross. A couple of them lived in these older apartments, and all of them were given eviction notices. Those apartment blocks don't exist as they do anymore. There was a nightclub that was right at the top of the stretch on the King's Cross. It was called the Goldfish, and the Goldfish was a nightclub establishment in Sydney for decades. It had no reason at all to fail. It was very, very successful. It was always packed, right? That is now a luxury Woolworths and luxury apartments on top of that, all completely knocked down.
Of course.
Um, yes, the King's Cross area, which had no reason to advertise itself, started getting posters that were put up down the streets as you would for any kind of touring gig saying, come to the Cross. No, nobody needed to advertise to go to the Cross. It was one of those places where, like, it's the nightlife, one of the nightlife establishments in Sydney. So yeah, it was quite debilitating for a lot of nightclubs and outdoor life in Sydney. I used to work in about 4 or 5 nightclubs, just helping set up with friends like that. None of them were like, making money hand over fist, but all of them were profitable and had no reason to shut up shop, right? All of them had to close within, I'm going to say, 2 months of these lockout laws coming into effect, because nobody was going into the CBD anymore because of the stupid restrictions that were put in place. I can't remember exactly what they were, but it was something kind of like you weren't, if once you got in the venue, you weren't let out after 11. I think like drinks had to stop at some point. I think it was like 1 o'clock in the morning. Um, like stupid things like that. It also didn't fail to notice everybody's minds that if you had a look at the map of Sydney where the lockout laws came into effect, it was all of the CBD except for this tiny little pocket where the casino was, which for some reason was exempt from all of the lockout laws. I'm pretty sure everyone can put
Hmm.
two and two together for that. And sure, granted, crime rates dropped inside the CBD, but it was something kind of like crime rates dropped by about a third, but overall attendance of like people in the city dropped by like 80% or something. So like the amount of attendees per crime kind of thing was completely out of whack now.
Hmm.
But the surrounding areas of the suburbs around mainly Newtown, all this like the surrounding suburbs had a massive spike in increase of attendances and also a huge spike in violent incidences, dramatically more so than what were actually sold from these lockout laws putting into effect. There were protests and political parties that were put up as a result to try and squash all of this. Which I went to numerous marches of these. They happened for quite a few years. Thankfully, these laws have now all been scrapped. I can't remember the exact rationale as to why, but I mean, kind of the read between the lines is they got as much real estate out of the inner city as that they possibly could. And it's like, okay, well, now you can have your nightlife back. Sydney has been kind of like, Sydney is still struggling to come over a lot of the ramifications from what's happened. We lost quite a lot of good, substantial nightclub spaces that don't exist anymore, just because they weren't given the means to actually keep afloat.
Hmm.
Um, but I mean, like the lockout laws got scrapped before COVID, then COVID's happened, and it has been very nice and endearing to see. To put a not to put a positive spin on things, because I do actually think it's an objective uptick that's happening in Sydney. Is there has been a little bit of a nightlife renaissance post COVID as a result of everybody being inside for 2 years, particularly in kind of like alternative and queer and goth clubby stuff. The amount of club events that have popped up post COVID has been really endearing to see. Not only that, but with the attendance that's popped up as a result, as people have been hungry, really hungry after being locked inside for, God, what was it, 2.5 years to go out and see some stuff. And there's been some really good events that have popped up as a result of that. I mean, I credit a fair bit of Rave Cave's success as been kind of being like, yeah, we started doing events again as soon as we could. Post lockout laws happened, and people have been hungry and wanted to come out to that, and people have stuck around for that. And other events have kind of seen similar results. There's another nightclub which I play every now and again called Reunion, which is I think also kind of been riding that wave a bit. Another one I play called Yokai Beats has also done that. Halo, another event that I played, has done that. There's another event called Sanctuary, which is kind of like the goth club in Sydney. They were the first off the cab of the rank and had been riding and had been hugely successful result ever since. And are still going quite strong. I could rattle off names like this and keep going. But yeah, it's been at least really encouraging, particularly after the damage that was done by the coalition Liberal national government in this state. It's been very nice to see how enthusiastic people are post COVID to go out and try and flourish a sense of community and go out to events of every, from live music stuff to club nights to everything in between. And while it's sad to see what we lost during the lockout laws and the damage that that objectively did do to our city, it's nice to at least see the community hunger and the results of attendance and quality events that have popped out in Sydney as a result of that. And I look forward to the years that are coming forward quite hopefully for Sydney and its nightlife in general,
Yeah,
which is very nice to feel, particularly as someone who makes his living off the industry.
100%. I mean, this is an outside perspective, but it sounds optimistic. It almost sounds, like
Mm,
scorched earth, like a forest fire. You had a thriving scene beforehand. So many huge artists came out of Sydney, I guess, like, or out of Australia as a whole. But there was like your Alice in Wonderlands and your Flume and What So Not
hmm
and Golden Features and all these people that used to
hmm
play shows in King's Cross. And I would hear about it as like a kid on the internet, and then was vaguely aware of the lockout laws, and then pretty much
hmm
have that all get just demolished for private interests to eat
Yep.
up, to make more money, and then COVID. But now coming back, it's almost like a fresh seeding of things, because the people are there. Like, the people still want the community. They were forced away from it, but the there's a desire among the citizenry um, and the community
Oh yeah.
to bring it back. So
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, and that's been really encouraging and endearing to see. But I mean, even beyond a local club level, the entire industry, and I assume that's fairly similar for most parts of the globe because everyone was inside and hungry to just do anything to be out of their four walls. The entertainment and live music scene in general in Australia has been in a bit of an uptick. We're having quite a bit of a trouble with bigger festivals at the moment being profitable, and a lot of that I feel comes down to A, the cost of living crisis that we're going through down here, but B, just how bloody expensive it is to get productions down to our part of the world. If you want to bring a touring thing over from America, the flights and travel and stuff that's involved and that's the cost as a result to get down here is quite high. But then also when you get down here, it's not like, say, in Europe where you can, go an hour and a half down the road and you're in another city that's got 6 or 7 million people, the same way you can do in the States. We've only got so many big cities here, and a lot of touring acts that come down here won't even go to all of them. It's pretty common for big touring shows or festivals that come down here, they will only play Brisbane and Sydney and Melbourne, and they won't go to Perth or Adelaide. Barely anyone goes to Darwin or Hobart. Those are very, very rarely ever thought of, which I think is a shame, particularly in Hobart. Hobart has a wonderfully beautiful music and arts and culture scene. There is a festival that happens down there called Dark Mofo every year, which is just creme de la creme of, everybody goes there. Have you heard of Dark Mofo before?
I've never heard of it. No.
You need to look it up and try and see if you can get down there. You will love it to a T.
Okay.
I've never personally been. I've had tons of friends go. I've had friends who perform at it, but I've seen all the photos and been like very envious of missing out on certain people who've gone down and played there. It's a fantastic thing that happens down there every year and kind of like the first beginning of winter.
Okay.
Um,
Is that
but
Morpho
yeah.
like the butterfly?
Oh, I'm Dark Mofo, Mofo.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Really cool festival event that happens. It's been happening down there for quite a while. Very boutiquey, very kind of like, let's find stuff that's very left of field and a little bit eccentric and weird. And like Health have played there like once or twice. So has Chelsea Wolf, the first two big ones that I know have played down there that I've really regretted missing. I'm sure I'll think of other ones, but yeah, it's a really fun little festival. Really fun little festival. Um, but yeah, we're in a bit of a weird flux with at least big stuff coming down here at the moment. There's been quite a few headlines at the moment about how hard it is for our big festivals to make money. Quite a few festivals have had some pretty big skew-ifs that have been all over the news lately, or have just had to completely stop because like we just can't afford it.
Hmm.
And a lot of that has come down to the cost of living things. So like we do have challenges at the moment. A lot of them are purely financial. There's the hunger to do stuff, but yeah, this is the downside of us being post-COVID. It has caused us fairly bad inflation rates and a bad cost of living crisis, which we're all dealing with
Yeah.
at the moment.
It seems like
But like
everywhere, dude. It's well
oh
fucked.
yeah, oh yeah, I know we're far from alone on
Yeah.
that front. I know this. The only one that I'm kind of more aware of is just the situation in the UK and just how much of a mess that is. They're dealing with fairly similar kind of situations to what we are. But like I still try and remain positive and hopeful for the most part, mainly because I can see the hunger for it is there.
Definitely.